before I give some brief remarks, I want to acknowledge the other members of the City Council who are here. The first African-American woman to be majority leader of the City Council, Councilwoman Lori Cumbo from Brooklyn, is here. We're joined by Councilmember, I see Jumani Williams just got in the house. Everyone knows Jumani. Councilmember Brad Lander from Brooklyn. Councilmember Vanessa Gibson from the Bronx. I don't think I'm missing anyone. You know, you heard from a lot of politicians today. Probably too many. But I wanted to come here today to say that every movement in modern American history, whether it be the African American Civil Rights Movement, or the anti-war movement, or the women's suffrage movement, or the movement for farm workers, or the LGBT Civil Rights Movement, these movements were not led by politicians. These movements were not started by politicians. That's right. These movements were not ended by politicians. These movements were led by people. That's right. Who in a moment in history, who in a moment of time, who in a moment of deep injustice, said we, the people, must rise up and create a movement to hold politicians accountable. So we can stand up here, and I think we are very lucky in New York City to have the elected officials that we have. But we can stand up here and we can talk about these things, and it's great. But ultimately, it is about the people. It is about the grassroots. It is about the bodega owner and the public housing resident and the teacher and the single mom working 3 jobs. It's about them. And you know, it's been said up here today. Dr. King, Rosa Parks, there was no social media. They weren't Facebooking. They weren't Instagramming. They weren't tweeting. They were marching. They put on their coat, they put on their hat, they put on their boots, and they put their bodies on the line. We need a little bit more of that in 2018. Now, everyone can tweet and Facebook and Instagram, and that's a way to engage people. But ultimately, a healthy democracy requires activist participants. That is what it requires. That's what Reverend Sharpton is about. He's about activist participants through his work at the National Action Network. Now, Reverend Sharpton's known me since I was 19 years old. My 21st birthday party was at a lesbian bar in the West Village called Henrietta Hudson. He walked in and said, "Where the hell am I in the West Village?" He got down though. He had fun. Not in that way. Stop it, Pastor Foy. And Reverend Sharpton and I went to New Hampshire together. When he ran for president, I supported him in 2004. And in my own district, in Chelsea, there was a man who many of you know, but it's important to repeat his name today. And I've heard Reverend Sharpton speak very eloquently about this man, Bayard Rustin. He was the organizer for Dr. King, for the 63 March. He lived in Chelsea. He was an openly gay man in the late 1950s and early 1960s. He was jailed, he was red-baited, he was targeted, he was beaten down. And he is one of the main advisors for Dr. King, who talked about nonviolence, even in the wake of the personal adversity that he had faced, not just as a black man in the 1950s and 60s, but as a black, openly gay man. This is pre-Stonewall. Stonewall was 1969. This was the late 1950s, the early 1960s. And what Reverend Sharpton has talked about is, I can't stand here today, and I will not stand here today and say I know what it's like to be a person of color in New York City. I will never know. I cannot know.
All right.
I am not stopped and frisked.
That's right.
I am not followed around a Dwayne Reed because people are looking at me the wrong way.
Come on now.
That doesn't happen to me. But it's about the intersectionality of our movements.
Yes.
It is about the fact that I am a gay man. That is not the same as being a person of color.
All right.
I am the only openly HIV positive elected official in the state of New York. And you know, it doesn't really win you votes to talk about being HIV positive, but it's a conversation that we must have, especially in communities of color. So I stand here today to say yes. Dr. King, he was not a politician. Reverend Sharpton, he's not a politician. He ran for office to hold the system accountable. James Baldwin, not a politician. Langston Hughes, not a politician. Ella Baker, not a politician. Bayard Rustin, not a politician. Audre Lorde, not a politician. Changemakers, activists, movement types. That is what we need more of in 2018. Because it's not about us up here. It's about the people out there. And it's not about standing here today to try to score points against the maniac in the White House. Because Reverend Sharpton has talked about it. We have problems here at home. The rent is too damn high. Public housing is crumbling. Subway fares going up. The cost of food going up. The cost of a haircut going up. The cost for a nice blouse or suit going up. Wages stagnant or go down. We have an affordability crisis in New York City. The playground for the wealthy. It is time for us to, of course, recommit against the horror of Washington, D.C., of course. But we have problems here at home. Big ones. 62,000 people in a shelter system, 25,000 of which are children under the age of 16 years old. We have to keep our own side of the street clean here.
All right. Come on.
We have to hold ourselves accountable and this city accountable. And remember who elected us.
Yes.
Remember who put us in office.
That's right.
I stand here with all of you on the shoulders of Reverend Sharpton and Martin Luther King Jr. and James Baldwin and Langston Hughes and Ella Baker and Audre Lorde and Bayard Rustin. They cleared the trail. They paved the road. They covered the path. And we march in their footsteps. Thank you all very much.
Corey Johnson, Speaker of the City Council, yet another unlicensed preacher.